Welcome to the Darkstream. Vox Day, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. This is actually my second stream today. First one you've been able to see. But I did a 2-hour interview with James Delingpole, which I believe is going to be released on his podcast relatively soon. And then he's told me that I can download it, and we'll put it up here on the Darkstream channel for everybody to watch. It's a fairly broad-ranging conversation. Actually hit some of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight. I know that a lot of people were looking forward to me appearing with Owen, talking about Iran, talking about what's going on with the Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz and all that sort of thing. And so I think the first thing to obviously mention is it looks like the entire thing is just Kabuki theater. I was suspicious, Simplicius was suspicious about the whole idea of this massive airstrike and nobody seeing it, not doing any real damage to anything. Nobody even taking a single shot, not just at the stealth bombers, but at the F-16s and the F-15s and the F-16s that were accompanying it. Just not that credible when you consider the way that the Houthis managed to keep the air attacks at bay in Yemen, and the way that neither Russia nor Ukraine can even fly anywhere near the front lines. And so, there's obviously a lot of subterfuge. There's obviously a lot of misinformation and disinformation being released. And, the very, very symbolic nature of the Iranian response, hitting a base that they knew had been emptied with 10 missiles, a 1 missile attack on Israel, and then the announcement suddenly of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. I mean, honestly, the whole thing just looks like it was for show. And, even the oil prices are dropping. We are attacking here now, so please be advised, both sides. Exactly. I mean, the British have a phrase for these sorts of conflicts, handbags at 20 paces. And in military terms, that's what this looked like. I mean, not to ignore the fact that, actual people did die in the real missile assaults on Tehran and Tel Aviv and other places. But, World War III, it is not. I mean, Russia, Ukraine, it is not. And at this point, it just doesn't look that serious. It doesn't look that credible. And I don't know what the purpose is. Is it 5D chess that is allowing Trump to relieve the pressure of AIPAC and the neoclowns? And some sort of secret plan to get rid of Netanyahu. Netanyahu was facing a major, major revolt in Israel 2 days before they launched their attack. And so, there's obviously an amount of, we don't know what's going on with the internal Israeli politics. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes in Washington. We don't even know which Trump is actually genuinely in charge, right? But what we do know is that it's not World War III. It's not a serious regional war. There's no troops on the ground anywhere. So this has just been limited to, tripartite lobbing tents at camels, more or less. Nemeister says it was regime change in the mode of Libya, Syria, Hezbollah. Well, I think that that's what it was supposed to look like. Was it? I mean, why would you think that the regime was going to change because you launched a few hundred missiles? It took a long time and a lot of troops on the ground to cause the regime change in Syria. And, 700 kilometers away. I mean, that doesn't mean that things can't happen. That doesn't mean things couldn't get serious. I'm just interpreting the evidence that we see. And like, for example, they made a big deal about, Rubio was talking about how China can't afford to have Iran shut the Strait of Hormuz. Well, the reality is China only imports 5 million barrels a day from the Strait of Hormuz. That's a lot. That's 5 tankers worth. But they already have a rail line that is capable of delivering oil directly from Iran and doing so in less than half the time, in about 40% of the time that it takes the oil tankers. Now, somebody said, well, that would take an awful lot of freight tanker cars. It would. A single freight tanker only carries 700 barrels of oil. Those big oil tankers carry on average about 1 million barrels of oil. But here's the thing. They would need about, I calculated 87,000 rail cars running back and forth on the 2 tracks. And they have the capacity to build 50,000 of those a year. In fact, China probably has the ability to produce more than that. That's the production capacity of the single largest Chinese rail equipment company. If they wanted to focus on it, they could get that many done in a year, the one company alone. And so Dan in Alabama has a good point. He says, I'm sure the rail line will have a pipeline running alongside it soon. No question. No question at all. And so, and because of course the rail line is useful for things other than oil. But the rail line will make the pipeline construction a lot easier. So anyhow, there's a lot going on that we don't know about. But I think that the apocalyptic hysteria that has infected a lot of people, especially those of the more evangelical Christian Zionist persuasion, really is best advised to be kept in check, because once more we're seeing that a little bit of heat in the Middle East does not mean that it's not a reliable sign that Jesus is about to show up. Could happen. No man will know the day. No man will know the hour. But in terms of the season, it's not really looking like the season, to be honest. There's a lot of elements that are missing, and there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. And so, I don't know if this helps to calm everybody down a bit. Claude Hopper says, Chud Jack points to his blackboard again, nothing ever happens. I mean, that's a pretty significant exaggeration, I think. Because a lot has happened. Clown World is obviously in the process of tottering. It hasn't collapsed yet, but it is looking like it's going to collapse. Sam says, since no one can physically invade Iran, can the strikes really be anything more than symbolic? No, I don't think they can. And, there were plenty of military analysts, credible analysts like Colonel McGregor, who came right out and said, the bunker busters will not work at the Fornow location. The only thing that might work would be a nuke, and we've got obviously plenty of reason to be dubious about whether anybody's got nukes. I mean, it's so obviously in everybody's advantage to pretend that they do. And there's actually some indications, more than a few indications, that the whole thing has been a big imperial peacekeeping scam. I don't know if you've read my book, A Mind Programmed, but you can read that, or you can read the public domain book that it was based on, which I loved, A Program Man. And the entire point of this, and the interesting thing is, the author is somebody who was very much in the scientific NASA sort of community. And the whole thesis of his book, and by extension mine, is that the N-bomb, which they could use to blow up a star, kept everybody in line. It kept the galactic empire from being challenged. And so you have the mutants from the purple sun world. You had the Prince Li Hu of the Alphan Empire, which was basically a stand-in for China. All of whom were trying to obtain this stranded N cruiser. And there's this very dramatic scene where the the Imperial agent and the captain, they get to the ship that had been stranded, and they go and they find out that there's nothing in the chamber. It's always been a big bluff to allow them to push others around, without being challenged. And one of the reasons I think that we're seeing the ceasefire is that it's become obvious that the nuclear facilities were not destroyed, and there can't be pressure to use non-existent weapons. Everybody who's involved, the Iranians, the Israelis, and the Trump administration, if there are no nukes, they all know. They all know there's nothing to be used. And so they all have to climb down together. Sam says, I get Zion Dawn appeasing AI PAC by allowing them to strike, but I don't see the need to use U.S. assets. They had to, because they had to give the bunker busters a try. Remember, they reported that it worked. How do you make a non-existent nuclear threat disappear? You hit it with bunker busters. That's the official story. They hit the nuclear enrichment facility with bunker busters, and they completely destroyed it. Don't forget, that's what we were told. Now, we know that didn't happen. We know the same thing that happened with regards to hitting the empty base happened. But now the official story allows them to say, well, Iran doesn't have those things anymore. Dan in Alabama says, we know we don't have them, but we think other countries do. Now we know perfectly. If we don't have them, nobody does. I strongly suspect that everybody is faking. I think if Iran wanted to, they could claim they had them. But the problem is, what good does it do? I mean, do you really think it's that likely that both India and Pakistan just happened to develop them at the same time? You know, do you really think that they managed to a big government project that, by the way, was run by a guy on his own private land? I mean, if you read, Miles Mathis, I mean, it's Miles. You have to be a little bit skeptical. But he makes some excellent, when he sticks to the facts, he makes some excellent points. And the fact that, the idea that they tested these weapons on the same land that the guy who was running it owned. And it was run by a colonel? Really? I am a omni-narrational skeptic. I have different reasons for reaching the conclusions that I do than Owen does. But Owen's instincts are excellent. He's very good at smelling a rat, and he smelled a rat before I did, but when I started looking into it, and discovered things like, well, when Hiroshima was bombed, there happened to be a very large firebombing mission aimed at a nearby town that didn't get bombed. And then when you read the reports that say, well, this just looks more like, what happened here looks more like a conventional firebombing than anything unusual, anything new. Now, obviously, they did something to make the story look good. They probably did have one B-29 dropping something that would make a mushroom cloud. If nukes are fake, what would you guess Chernobyl, Fukushima, 3 Mile Island were? No, nuclear power is not fake. Obviously nuclear reactors run, but the question is, do they actually have the ability to to set off the explosive power that they claim to be able to do? That's what's dubious. And one of the reasons it's dubious is because there's no radiation there. The radiation was supposed to be left there for centuries. There are cherry trees that are growing in the middle of Hiroshima that were there when they got bombed. Claude Hopper says, I had a student from Hiroshima. Her family never left. All were fine. Sam says, hasn't ever considered the matter, looks into it for half an hour, completely dismantles it. SDL. Yeah, I mean, that does seem to be the case from time to time. Hawk says, do reactors actually do what they're told they do when they malfunction? I doubt it. I mean, obviously bad things happen. Something was up with Chernobyl, but it wasn't anywhere nearly as bad as people said. And, there's plenty of animals and other things living around Chernobyl now. I don't know if the base level of radiation is still as high as the science would tend to predict it is, but the fact that they actually had a plan for space travel using a series of atomic bombs propelling the spacecraft, I mean, that's just getting into the... I always thought that sounded incredibly stupid. Nimmeister says, people are moving back to the area around Chernobyl. Yeah, so it looks like a fair amount of the information that was provided there was not legitimate either. So, and again, I'm not taking the approach that nothing ever happens and nothing is real, etc., etc. But it's very important to look at why things are supposed to exist. What has been the effect of the idea of nuclear weapons? Well, it has allowed the erection of this globalist edifice and the belief that it's impossible to engage in war. It's impossible to resist the might of the U.S. Army. And think about how quickly the Soviets supposedly acquired the technology. I mean, think about that. Let me see here. So the Soviets' first atomic test. Okay. Detection of the first Soviet test was September 1949. So if we're supposed to be believed, then they managed to quickly produce the whole thing in starting from scratch, starting from absolute zero with nothing. They managed to produce it in 4 years. And we're supposed to believe that Iran couldn't do it in 30. Right? People say, well, North Korea, the reason that they've been safe. I mean, just think rationally. Does it really make sense that Libya just decided not to? They were going to produce it, and then they just decided not to, and they trusted the West. Maybe, but probably not. And I think that the main reason that the Iranians didn't decide to join the bluff club is because the pressure to use a non-existent weapon would have been too great. How difficult would... Iran is an oil-rich country. Pakistan, and also, it's a high IQ country with a lot of engineers. Pakistan, not so much. India, not so much. And yet they're both nuclear powers? And Iran couldn't just buy a warhead? I mean, Iran has some of the best drones in the world. They're focusing on where warfare is actually going. Dan says, just before the B-2 strike, supposedly an underground test was detected in Iran. Yeah, there's like an earthquake or something. I mean, endless posturing, Sam says. Power is demonstrated, not explicated, as Rollo Tomasi would say. Yeah, and so, again, it is possible that nukes exist, but I do not think that we can reasonably accept the official narrative, considering all the ways it just seems to have to vanish. All the reasons that people would have to use it. And then, of course, whenever a country gets powerful enough to be left alone on its own, then they suddenly announce that they're a nuclear power. I mean, we know perfectly well why Israel relies upon it. There's a very good chance that they need to preserve the illusion of that. But anyhow, perhaps one day we'll find out that they are real. Hopefully not. I hope they're not real. But what I'm saying is not based on my hopes and my preferences. What I'm saying is based on the logical conclusions of the obvious observations, as well as the historical anomalies and obvious falsehoods related to the historical accounts. And once you see the anomaly, and once you confirm a falsehood, it's pretty safe to go ahead and dismiss the whole thing, especially if there's a very, very significant benefit to the people who are pushing the narrative from the narrative. So that's all I've got for now. One thing I'm thinking seriously about, we need to revive UATV. We need to provide it with some new boosts. Unfortunately, one of the after effects of these issues that we've been having is that we just haven't been able to bring people back in. So what I'm planning to do is, once we get the paywall up, I'm going to bring back a monthly Voxiversity. And it's only going to be available on UATV. Owen is also planning to make the live stream of our weekly Big Bear and Dark Lord show available only on UATV. So, UATV was in an excellent shape about 14 months ago, and we want to get back to where it was, because then we can start building on it. And so that's going to be the objective. On the Castelia front, I think I've shown you this. Fencing Bear says, I'm happy for you to advertise my live stream. More than happy to, but Fencing Bear, what I'd love to see is, I'd love to see you get back more into the most popular stuff you were doing is Tolkien, and I was thinking that I don't know if there's more Tolkien to do. I would think so, because there's a lot more books, all the historical books out. But I was also thinking that doing Lewis as well might be something that would be of a lot of interest to people. I realize I'm talking to an author here, and authors are amazingly good at completely ignoring what will actually sell, and they usually like to focus on some esoteric thing that nobody actually wants to read or watch. But and I'm guilty of this too from time to time. Heck, look at the way that I insist on subjecting everybody to my music. What I really should do is just put it up on Voxophonic and let whoever wants to listen to it, right? But Servant of the Secret Fire is going to be written. I took your advice. I'm impressed. That's very, very rare. The extent to which John C. Wright ignored my advice to write a children's trilogy that somehow turned into Swan Night Saga, which is excellent in its own right, but was never going to sell 1/10 as well as the trilogy I was trying to encourage him to write. But John is I have to follow my muse, and I respect that. You are a rare bear, Fencing Bear. There's no question about that. But I would actually encourage you to, with your stream, what I would encourage you to do is focus on Tolkien and Lewis. That's what brings people in. There's nothing wrong with doing personal interest stuff. Whether it's focusing on Marian esoterica or whatever else. I do plenty of esoteric things I know that nobody cares about, or very few people care about. But the key to building this stuff up and making it stable and viable is paying attention to what people want to do. What people want me to do is they want me to do Voxiversities. So be it. We'll figure it out. We'll work it out. Especially with AI, it should be much easier now than it used to be. We'll certainly have better tunes, right? But anyhow, that's the plan. And so I would be interested. Actually, go ahead and fire up some ideas. What would you? I have to do the Taiwan thing. I'm going to be doing that regardless, and that'll be open. Thanks to everybody who had done the old subscription to support that. Dances with Logo says, just waiting for verification. Excellent. That's good to know. And also says, Tolkien streams were the best, Fencing Bear. But what I'd like to know is, what Voxiversities would you like to see? I mean, obviously people want to see one on Sigma. People want to see one on Bravos. Dark Lord news can't happen until we get back to where we were. I mean, we're basically right now at around, we're about 1/12 of where we want to be. So we need to get everybody to come back. And there's certain things we can do. Obviously, in addition, on both the reaching out side, as well as on the content provision side. But and we're always going to run into the problem of the creators always get drawn to YouTube. They always get drawn to the public stuff because they always get excited about the big numbers elsewhere. And it's easier elsewhere, right up until they kick you off, right? I mean, this is the same problem that independent publishers have. You need the bigger authors in order for the publishing company to function, right? But the bigger the author gets, the less he needs a publishing company. So that's one of the reasons why we got focused on the bindery in the first place. Speaking of which, I'll show you that again here. That's what is going to be, we've been making cases all week. We're waiting for the press to come in to allow us to do the hubs. And possibly as soon as tomorrow, we might be getting the pigskin. This is a meditations. It's not actually bound yet, you can see, but it's not glued or anything. But it's this is just done to test it. But we have the pigskin case, and it's so nice. I mean, everybody who subscribes to Castalia Library and Castalia History is going to absolutely love our switch to pigskin. I mean, it's the rare Spanish, the expensive Spanish cowhide is great, but honestly, we really can't do that because it's just, we'd have to increase our prices if we wanted to use that. The pigskin, we don't have to. And I think that people are going to be super stoked about that. American balkanization content. Okay. I'm a little bit reluctant to take on things that involve just, frankly, complete guesswork. But I'll look into it. Asymmetrical warfare, that actually does need to be discussed. Full SSH profiles, yeah, that's an obvious one. But we will get there. And then of course, we're going to have the radio set up very soon. That's a good idea. Jacob Kalsi, Finland's greatest military science fiction author, says video version of the SJW attack survival guide. That's a good idea. I like that idea. That's something a lot of people could use. So, all right. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for all the great ideas. Tomorrow, be sure to tune in because Big Bear and the Dark Lord will be appearing together. I will be showing up on Owen's stream partway through, or after, halfway through. I don't even know what what exactly it is he does, but let me see if I have that here. oops. This just kind of made me laugh. I always enjoy having an excuse to produce the artwork. Here we go. There we are. Yeah, so this is, oops. This is tomorrow's stream. And yeah, we're going to be discussing, obviously, some of the stuff related to what's going on in Iran. There's going to be new developments, in the next 24 hours, obviously. So, we always have a good time. I hope you guys enjoy watching it too. I will see you then. Oh, something on economics. Yeah, definitely. And by the way, I'll give you a very brief book review. Do not read The Unconsoled by Ishigeru, the Nobel Prize winner. It's like a combination of Kafka, Proust, and John C. Wright in his most desperate need of an editor. Every time any character opens their mouth, they go on for 6 pages. It actually, I really like the author. I really admire the author. And it honestly made me want to punch him in the face. So, there you go. I'm Vox Day. This is the Darkstream.